This bitch about to be 3 hours. Like the fucking Batman movie that I'm.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Seriously Loco, a seriously crazy fan podcast for El Paso Locomotive FC, a proud member of the Beautiful Game Network and brought to you by Roughneck Scarves and Icarus FC. I'm your host, Phil Bakke, and I am joined tonight by my co-hosts, Mika Burrell. Mika, how you doing?
Doing well. I'm very excited for this. It finally feels like we can get down to business and talk about the season, which is, 2 sleeps away. So I'm doing well, man. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, likewise. It feels like it's been a long off season, but yet I can't believe the start of the season is actually here. It's
right.
Yeah, an exciting time to be a Locomotive fan, I think. And to continue the conversation as well, we have Christian Canales. Christian, are you feeling that same level of excitement right now?
It's season 4, guys. Here we go. Do have to add, Mika said, it's 2 sleeps for us. Might be an additional sleep for you, Phil. You might need a little siesta to make it through halftime.
What time's kickoff again for you?
10 p.m. local time.
That's some La Liga shit.
It's ending at midnight. Yeah, maybe I'll eat some paella for dinner just to make it feel authentic.
Nice.
Well, Christian, I mean, it would not. Well, I guess before we get into anything too deep, we should do some admin. This is I would say in earnest the start of season 4, but this is by no means the first podcast that we've recorded for season 4. We've done a roundup of the Hutchinson hire. We've done a interview with John Hutchinson. We've done interviews with multiple players who have joined in the offseason. And to accompany all that, we've got articles about a handful of the new signings with some room there as well. So if you're wondering, where can I find all this stuff? Well, first and foremost, if you found this podcast, you can find it on the platform you're listening to this podcast on, any of the major podcast platforms. And then if you're looking for the articles, you can find us on Patreon, patreon.com/seriouslyloco. There's a handful of articles on there. I know Mika was particularly prolific in the offseason in terms of turning around articles. And we were in that Y Scout we've got GIFs accompanying the articles talking about how different players play and what you can expect coming from players in this new season. So yeah, tons of content out there. If you're really getting geeked up and ready for the start of the season, you've got 2 more days to take in as much content as possible, and that's where to find it. And if you are looking for our socials, you can find us on Twitter at Seriously Loco or on Instagram at Seriously_Loco, I think. So that about does it for the admin stuff. I think I covered everything. Guys, anything I'm missing?
I think that's it. We'll try our best to keep the Patreon going. I've already got a couple ideas in mind for future pieces. I know, Phil, you've been writing on there too. Christian's written in the past. So yeah, trying to bring you all the content in season 4.
And there would be no better way to start out the season preview episode than with, for those who know the podcast, they will be well familiar with this aspect. But Christian's question, Christian, what have you got for us to kick this new season off?
So I came up with a question that I feel like it's only appropriate to kick off the John Hutchinson era of Locomotive. Because it has to do with food and the worst food that you could eat. So it just seemed right. But so we've all been in sports bars, Applebee's, Chili's type stuff, and they all have their super appetizer platter. pick 4 of your favorite appetizers and build your dream appetizer platter. So I want to know, what are your guys? If you had to pick a appetizer platter with 4, what's going on there?
Dang, dude, 4? Now we're gonna get roasted by Hutch for portion control. Phil, what you got?
Oh man. Wow. This is a tough one. I would say in terms of things that just like immediately sprang to mind in terms of apps, I mean, for some reason, like onion rings hit just like right off the bat. A good onion ring, and don't get me wrong, there's a big distinction there, but a good onion ring is tough to beat. I'm trying to think, like, I feel like my brain's exploding, like, trying to think of this question on the spot.
Give your brain diabetes.
Straight up. Damn.
I'll tell you I think I have 4.
Go for it.
So I'm basic. I think anything with fries is a winner. Like, people roast the Europeans because they put fries on everything, it seems, but I would just fit in there. French fries are like the most elite way to make a potato. That's gotta be on there. Mozzarella sticks. Yes. Onion rings, I probably would go onion rings, Phil. And I don't know, maybe like I feel like you need a protein in there, so I'll go like buffalo wings. That could be part of a sampler, right? So
boneless or traditional?
Traditional. Boneless are chicken nuggets. Like,
I agree.
Sorry.
Just checking.
I used to only eat boneless, and then I grew up.
When we had the whole wings versus flats conversation a while back. So yeah, I'd say, like, in terms of stuff that you didn't mention or things that like came to mind that maybe like this is a more recent development, but any sort of like Brussels sprout, and I'm talking like the the like really roasted, like they gotta be
air fryer.
Yeah. Like, I'm not talking, whatever, boiled Brussels sprouts. Like, don't get me wrong. And they've got to have something else going on. Like, there's some like maple bacon, Brussels sprouts, that sort of thing. And then, the fries are hitting home, especially if you get like, there's a lot of places that'll do, some kind of like whatever Parmesan, garlic type situation, truffle fry. Yeah.
Have either of y'all ever been to San Francisco before?
Once. I have been once. Yeah.
I was as a kid, so I don't consider it having properly gone. No.
So there's this like brewery / restaurant. It might actually be in more places in San Francisco. It's just the only place that I've ever seen it. Called Gordon Biersch, and they make the absolute best garlic fries. Nice. Just like they're, for all I know, I think they could be like fried in garlic oil. They're just so good. But you threw me for a loop there with the Brussels, Phil. I'm thinking like Applebee's, Chili's, but you're at, I don't know what kind of bougie sports bars you're going to in Ohio, but remember where you came from, please. I guess that's closer to where you came from than here, anyways. But I guess for me, so I'm not a big onion person personally, and the fries, I don't know. I just feel like I want more appetite, because like for me, like the fries will come with like an entree, so it doesn't quite make it an appetizer. But to each their own. Like if that's your ultimate, then I get it. But for me, I think it's mozzarella sticks. Wings, traditional for sure. Potato skins, loaded potato skins, and fried pickles.
Oh, fried pickles are up there. That's a good shout.
I will disrespect myself and go to Hooters for fried pickles. So fair enough.
Mika, man, On the day after International Women's Day, Mika.
I was gonna say.
Rip headphone users. I'm sorry. Their fried pickles slap. But that's the only thing that slaps or should be slapped at Hooters. So, anyway, shall we get on to the football, gentlemen?
What a way to kick off another season. Yeah, we will actually talk quite a bit of Locomotive. We've got a bunch on tap here, and we've got the beginning of the Hutchinson era. We're going to talk about the squad. We're going to talk about all the different aspects of it. We'll talk about the tactics. We'll talk about expectations. We'll talk about predictions. We are going to cover it all. And it's all kind of shaped by listener questions. So throughout this, when you're hearing us talk, we've got questions from folks on Twitter, folks on Instagram. So if you're wondering, like, we're going to do this all season in terms of asking for listener questions throughout. So hit us up on those platforms and you can get involved. But guys, it is the start of the John Hutchinson era. We are, out of the initial birth of the club, this initial era under Mark Lowry, and now we are out into uncharted waters. We've got a brand new manager, quite a bit of change to the squad. So how are we feeling about the beginning of the John Hutchinson era? And I mean, Mika, we can start with you. A manager that obviously has a very varied experience, a lot of different, and a very varied coaching staff, I would say too. But Hutchinson comes in brand new to this era of USL and his first time at an independent team, with a very distinct style. What are you making of the John Hutchinson era, and what can we expect?
Listen, I'm a creature of habit. I'm a risk-averse person. I'm someone who's uncomfortable with change. I fear the unknown. So, having said all of that, it does scare me a little bit, just how much change this squad and the club have gone through. Obviously, 3 years of Mark Lowry, plenty of success, it has to be said. It can be a little scary, thinking about all the change that we've gone through, and I think that probably a lot of fans out there feel the same way. That being said, we talked about it early December when Hutch was hired. I do like the fact that we've kind of gone and grabbed someone a little bit from left field, not what we predicted at all or could have ever predicted, because it tells me that, not just anyone can come and step into this role and step into the shoes, that Mark Lowry has left to fill, to be fair. I'm feeling good about it. And as for what can we expect, I mean, that's the really hard thing, because, all we have to really judge on it is preseason. And I don't know that that's really useful. It's, even up to the highest levels, some of the most elite clubs in the world can drop shocking preseasons and go on to win the title. I mean, it's all very, hard to extrapolate anything from that, I think. So yeah, I don't know what to expect. I mean, I think the one thing we can for sure say is there will be a shift in style. Quite a dramatic shift, I would say, from just the little bit that I have seen of preseason, what we know of John as a coach, what he's told us, of course, his recruitment. I think there's a very intentional signings have been made in the offseason. The squad has gotten younger, way younger, I would say. A lot of experience has left, but also a lot of talent has come in, and a lot of young, promising players as well. A lot of academy players. I mean, we made headlines in the offseason for signing a multitude of players to USL Academy contracts. So, this is a younger, leaner machine. I think, it'll take a little bit of time to gel. I think that's only natural when you've got so much turnover, so much change. But I think it can be really exciting at the same time, because you can see something be built from the ground floor. Same way, we did with Mark Lowry. And that ended up being a pretty beautiful story indeed, I would say. So, yeah, it's scary, but it's exciting.
Yeah, it has felt almost a little bit like that first season, that inaugural season. But Christian, I mean, a lot of holdovers from, there's still a decent core of that Lowry side is sticking around. And how much is that going to help kind of kickstart the Hutchinson era? Is that going to help it get off the ground a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the most important things that the club did in the offseason is, um, there were some people that we definitely would have liked to have kept. Uh, the ones that we did end up keeping, I think, are the leaders of this team. Maybe not the most at this point in their careers, like the most talented. And that's not shade, and you guys know I'm talking about like Yuma and Richie. They're not the star athletes on this team, but they are unquestionably the leaders in that locker room. And so I think that that's really important when you have a new coach coming in and so many new faces, that you don't really forget how we got here. Like tactics can change, but I think that the philosophy as a team, that's important to retain when you have all these new identities coming in. It's important that you have that leader that remembers how we got through those first 3 seasons and became who we are. Keep that going, because I think that, I mean, you saw it with Mark. We, oh, not the most, like, what's the word? I guess spectacular players in the league. There are definitely more flashy players, but undeniably top 3 team in the league 3 seasons in a row. And that's because of the team identity. And I think that keeping the people like Yuma and Richie around, is a key part of that.
It As we get into kind of the squad makeup and how things are shaping up as we head into things, obviously retaining those players was really important, but inevitably we were never going to retain the whole team, and certainly Hutchinson wouldn't want, he's not going to want to retain everybody, because he's going to want to make this squad in his own image and after his own style. And so we did have a number of big ins in terms of bringing in new blood to the team, fresh players in. So we had in the offseason 9 new players join, and that was Sanupe, Egaluz, Hines, Newton, Bagel, Francois, Calvillo, John Brown, and Harry Brockbank. So big ins of these players, this batch of players that has been brought in by John Hutchinson. Which of these is the most exciting, or who are you most maybe looking forward to in terms of making an impact? And do you think, I guess maybe we'll say too, like, do you think this group is suited to what Hutch is trying to do?
Definitely. I think that a lot of pace has walked through the door at Southwest University Park. Not necessarily something you would associate with a Mark Lowry side. It was never about pure raw athleticism. I think we spoke about that many times over the years. So that is a different philosophy that John has taken to the transfer market. As for who I'm really excited about, I mean, there's a lot of players here. I mean, you and I have both done some deep dives, and we fired up the Y Scout, see what these boys are about. We've spoken to them. So I think every one of them has really, big potential to be special here. There's a lot of internationals have joined us. I think that's 4 now on the squad. But if I had to pick one, I can't even pick one. I think for me, it's a toss-up between Cristiano Francois, just because I think he's a known quantity in this league. Scored a lot for Miami, to be fair to him. Looks like an absolute beast, even in preseason. Like, he looks like he's ready to go in midseason form. But also Emmanuel Sanupe, maybe on the other side of the pitch. He's really exciting. Elite footballing education, as we found out when we spoke to him on the pod a couple weeks back. And Another player with bags of pace, can score goals as well, and seems like he's really excited to be here. Um, and yeah, I think it's really interesting too that we've brought in a lot of like leaders, like for example Harry Brockbank, has captained Bolton Wanderers in the past, so adding to that core of leadership that Christian spoke about, I think it's really important that we've done that as well. So yeah, but Francois and I think Sinope are the ones that I call out. But again, all 9 of these guys are exciting in their own ways.
Christian, how are you feeling about this group, and how have you, I guess from that fan's perspective, like how have you started to connect or start to feel like about this team, I guess, coming together now that you've had the chance to speak to a few of the players?
Yeah, I mean they all seem like they are um, professional and team player, which I think is an important quality to have held over from that Lowry era. As he said at one point, and we've seen in like promotional videos from the team and stuff, like that sign. I don't remember exactly what it says, like in the training room at the practice facility, but it's like, if you're not willing to give everything for the team, then turn around. And I think that the club has done a good job of making sure that that is a mentality that they're keeping around. So I think that professionally and attitude wise, I think that it's going to be a really good year for the team. And as I'm sure will be said a couple of times in the duration of this episode, it might not be our best season, but I think that it's going to be one to build on, and it's going to lay a good foundation, just like we did in 2019. And I think that I don't think anyone is like discounting Locomotive, but I still think we managed to surprise people. So I think that would be a good year.
The thing that struck me about a lot of these signings, and I know we spoke about it at kind of different times, but it seemed like, one, obviously, as you said, Mika, like Hutch wasn't afraid to go out and get someone who maybe isn't known in USL, like maybe isn't a there's not a direct kind of like body of work where we're like, oh, okay, I can see like how this translates directly. We're more so looking at like their capabilities, at their qualities as a player. But he also clearly values the education and like where someone was brought up. So bringing in Emmanuel Sinupe, who was brought up through Tottenham Hotspur's academy, had a lot of amazing things to say about the quality of education he got there. Ander Egalu's coming through Athletic Club Bilbao, and him again speaking very highly of his education. Harry Brockbank even coming through Bolton. When he was coming up through the club, they were challenging in Europe and all those things. So there's a lot of different levels of experience and also that education, I think, throughout this group. And like you mentioned, Christian, as well, like the mentality in the guys that we've spoken to and had the pleasure of speaking to, like they have a very measured sort of balance between their ambition and their humility, which is a tough balance to find, because there's a lot of people who are ambitious who back themselves almost like to a level of like delusion, and then there's guys who are like way too deferential and don't really believe in themselves. These guys like really toe that line quite well, where there's a lot of guys who still back themselves to play at a very high level, but aren't kind of over the top about it. So I just was really struck by that in terms of kind of the personalities that they were able to find for the team. And yeah, I'm excited about this group coming in. And like you said, Mika, I think Francois like is that kind of attention grabber in terms of like, proven USL output in goals and assists. But yes, there's something about Sinupe that like there's an X factor there, and like his capabilities as a player, it's very exciting to see what he might be able to do in this league, and he's done quite well in preseason. But Christian, I think you've got something.
Yeah, and just you talked about Francois being that guy because of his like proven USL output, and I think that someone that a lot of people might be sleeping on is Newton. Actually, Evan Newton, giant shoes to fill in net, for Logan there, but he's like the USL's all-time leader in saves and clean.
Yeah.
So for a keeper, how as far as statistics wise, what you ask for. So I think that I'm interested in what he does because it's one of those things where yes, but when was the last time he played? You know. So I think it'll be interesting. He's definitely one to keep an eye on for sure because he's a known quantity, but also unknown in the sense that he hasn't played it in a little while. And so he might be a little bit departed numbers, but maybe he's not, and maybe he shows up and somehow we made an improvement in that, with the release of Logan. So that'll be something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, it's a good shout. And I mean, you mentioned the outs, and I mean it is a good segue into talking about some of the key departures this season, which of which the main ones: Mishak Jerome, Brian Rebillon, Nick Ross, Logan Ketterer, Maka King, and Leandro Carrijo. Like, that list is only 5 names long, but each one stings a little bit, carries a little weight to it. We knew that there was going to be change when Mark announced that he was leaving. And there's a couple of names on here that I think we knew were probably going to follow him and ended up doing so. But of these names, I mean, a lot of fan favorites, a lot of history with Locomotive. So how are you guys feeling about that ins group, the ability to, make up for some of these losses?
It's hard to say, isn't it? I mean, I'm a firm believer in building a squad from the back, and of course that starts with the goalkeeper. So, I mean, Logan Ketter is a huge loss. I think at the same time, though, a lot of fans and certainly us thought that he deserved a shot in MLS, and he did get that move to Montreal Impact. Don't know if he's made an appearance yet, like actually in goal, but maybe on the bench. So yeah, that's a big loss, but like Christian said, you go out and get statistically the best performer in this division in Evan Newton, and hopefully that works out. He is a little bit older than Logan, so something to kind of keep an eye on there. Although goalkeepers, they tend to play a lot longer than your outfield players, so maybe not so much of a big deal. So yeah, Logan's a big loss, and obviously he's very, very popular with the Locomotive fans. The closest player to Section 105 for a half of a game, to be fair to him. And yeah, I think he really endeared himself to the fans here, so that's a big loss. Nick Ross hurts me too. I really hope that we'd keep him, and it turns out we're actually playing against him on Saturday. Maka King, I mean, that was one that kind of gave people whiplash because he was announced as coming back and then moves to Colorado Springs, who have built quite a formidable project out there. So, yeah, and that's not to say that the other names you mentioned there aren't big losses as well. But like you said, we always knew that this turnover was coming, and that Mark Lowry was definitely going to take some of his guys with him. And a lot of experience has left the club, to be fair, in players like Jerome, like Carrijo, and yeah, it's always tough. And I think, again, like I said at the top of the show, there's gonna be some road bumps, right? Because that level of turnover naturally follows that people are still gonna need time to gel. And so I would plead with the fans that we be patient. And it might be rough waters at first, but these guys, they seem to be getting along quite well in preseason. But once kickoff starts for an actual competitive game, that's completely different. It's really hard to simulate that kind of thing. So, yeah, a lot of key outs this season, but at the same time, it's exciting, to just freshen up put a new lick of paint on it, if you will. And we have gotten a lot younger. That's something that I've harped on for 2 seasons now. And Hutch has not been shy to tell people that he doesn't see them in his plans, and has moved on some older pieces, if you will. So, yeah, it's bound to have some effects, some knock on effects, but I think at the same time it was needed, and it was only fair that the club allowed Hutchinson to put his stamp on things.
Christian, of these key outs, who hurts the most for you?
I mean, footballing wise or emotionally wise?
Let's
They're
go.
gonna be two different answers.
We'll go footballing, then emotional.
On the field, I am personally gonna miss Brian the most. I mean, he's just such a fun player to watch all the time. Um, just kind of like I'm a Mexico fan, so to me, he's kind of like the Tecatito of our team, in that there's just a lot of flair to his game, and he can just do it. He can pass, he can dribble, he can score a few goals. So I think he's kind of a big all around player that we're gonna miss. Emotionally, of course, having Carijo not return is a little bit of a blow, but his, I mean, I feel like his time has come, unfortunately, and I don't think that we'll see him play somewhere else um, again. So I think that low key retirement for him at this point. So that's emotionally. But Mika did bring up earlier today in a video that the team put out, there is a blonde haired, very strong jawed gentleman in the video that may have been Lucho, but he didn't have bleached hair a week ago in footage that the team put out. So I don't know if the team's trying to keep a secret from us or something. But that'll be interesting. I'm waiting to see what happens on Saturday. I haven't completely given up hope.
Did we hold on? Oh, we were talking to Jose Aguinaga last season, Blondie Naga. I was trying to think if there was is there a Blucho?
Don't think it's them. It might have been Lucho. Maybe he's
Because
just trying out something.
we had Lee Blandro as well, as you are mentioning. So Blucho. So yeah, I do think there is. It's funny that you mentioned that. I think Mishak is one that we sort of like knew it was going to happen, but it's still, that one still stings a bit, just because I think he leaves Locomotive still a criminally underrated center back, and he at points last year he was genuinely up there with one of the best center backs like in USL period. And I'm confident in saying that. So that one stings. Although, again, another player who's kind of getting up there, like, has been around for quite a while. So this is all part of the youth injection that Hutch has brought to El Paso Locomotive. And in that, he did have his eye on retaining a few key players, and there are a few key players who have stuck around, namely Lucho, Josue Aron Gomez, Sebastian Velasquez, Andrew Fox, and a person that we maybe thought would not have stuck around, Diego Luna. Which of these is the standout for you guys, and who are you thinking was the coup in terms of almost like a new signing, if you will, in terms of keeping them around?
I feel like you're asking me that question with the like a new signing. I mean, Diego, it's hard to look past the 18-year-old, isn't it? Because I think everyone, maybe not everyone, but certainly myself, I thought that he was going to move on. We saw him traversing Europe, trialing at Anderlecht, at Vitoria Guimarães, like all these big clubs in Europe who are perfectly reasonable to have some interest in the young American. He also made his U.S. men's national team, age group debut. So it's been a big year for him, big season for him. So yeah, it is like a new signing in the sense that that's the type of player that would get fans on side through regime change, if you will. He still has that star potential, the ability to make something out of nowhere. God, he's only 18 years old, so I think that was a coup, and it seems like he is, despite the fact that he's done those trials and stuff, he seems really locked in, very much still interested in playing for El Paso Locomotive. He loves the fans love him. So I think that's a huge, huge retention for us because that again, that just keeps people coming through the turnstiles, doesn't it? And gives people something to look forward to, even if results might not be immediately there. He's still very key and fun to watch. But Solignac as well, I thought he maybe could have interest higher up. We know he's played in MLS before, as well as in Europe. I mean, maybe the only thing counting against him is age, maybe, but I think he's still very much a serviceable attacker for us and very important. Scored some really crucial goals for us last season. And then, Gomez is for me a club legend. So again, that transition to this new Hutchinson era, I think it's important to keep players like that around because they're important to the fabric of the club. So yeah, I'm happy with the players that we did retain.
And I mean, Christian, of that group, I know it's interesting looking at it because of these retentions or some of these retentions, like we are looking at a lot of attackers, and we're also looking at a decent amount of attackers in. Do you think this group gets? Obviously, they'll be pushed by the new blood, but how do you think this group meshes with this this new injection?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to have plenty of depth up there from what we know about how John wants to play. It's a very very physically demanding philosophy, and so I think that being able to have that rotation up front is going to be really really key to maintaining performance throughout the season. So I don't think necessarily that it'll be a big competition for, am I worried that I'm not going to start? Obviously, I think that they all want to be available. They want to be able to be chosen. They don't want to take that decision away from the manager. But I think that it's will be able to move people around, and I think that we'll see a lot of regular rotation, just because it's going to big ask for them to play John Hutchinson's style of football.
Well, along those lines, we had a question from NG Nick Go on Instagram, and he asked, "How do you think Calvillo, Richie, Seba, and Luna all fit, and who sits?" We got a lot of midfielders, some attacking midfield. How does this all come together? How does Hutch fit the pieces together?
I mean, first of all, he left Dylan out, so how dare he? There's been enough Dylan erasure in the past. Let's leave that in the past, please. But I think that like I said, I think that it's just going to be a lot of rotation. Like who sits, I think it's just going to vary each match. Because I think that keeping them all healthy and keeping them all fit is going to require that. I don't think that you're going to see, especially in the front part of the field, the midfield, and the attack. I think you'll see very many people start more than 2 or 3 games in a row. I just don't think the team is built like that this season. With Mark, squad, you could almost set your watch to his lineup. So I think it's just going to be different. I don't think that there's going to be a standard 11.
Yeah, and of the players that Nick from Instagram highlighted here, he says Calvillo, Richie, Seba, Luna. Ostensibly, these players could play together, actually, and we have
Yeah.
seen them play together in preseason. And we'll get on to the tactical kind of outlook, but in a midfield three, Calvillo or Richie could anchor while Seba and Luna are the eights. We saw that quite a bit. So of that specific group, maybe nobody sits, but I think Christian's spot on that there's going to be a lot of rotation. And as we know, at down the stretch last season, we were playing every 3 days.
Yeah.
So this squad's going to be probably put through something similar. I don't remember the entire schedule, but I'm sure there's going to be some fixture congestion as we get towards the business end of the season, just because USL I don't know why they do it, but they do. So yeah, I think that'll be what happens is a lot of rotation and I think a lot of discovering what it is these players can do really well and where they can play, because it's not, we've done some of the scouting on some of these players, but it's not exactly clear how they'll be used by John Hutchinson. I think John Hutchinson has ideas about these players that maybe those players themselves don't have, and I think we've gleaned that from some of our interviews, to be fair. So yeah, I think there will be a lot of discovery, if you will, of what these players do best.
When it comes to attackers, like I think we've even seen from some of the preseason lineups that a lot, as you mentioned, Mika, like a lot of these players are going to play in positions that we don't necessarily associate them with. I think we've seen a handful of players that we would call like attacking midfielders or wingers play as a striker, with Lucho out or Lucho's in there. And then we've got wingers playing as winger, and we've got Velasquez has played in the 10, Luna's played in the 10, Luna's played on the wing, Hines has played on the wing, Sanupe plays on the wing. Like there are a lot of potential variations. And yeah, I think fitting all these attacking pieces in is a lot more about being able to find that right combination and find that right role for each player versus saying, oh, like this person is going to start over this person 100% of the time. But it does create some dilemmas in there for players who may be thinking that they'll lock down X position or Y position, but they may end up actually playing somewhere else based on the qualities that Hutch has seen. So yeah, it's a really interesting approach, because I don't think we've seen that. It has been, as Christian mentioned, like it has been very much more kind of like cut and dried in terms of like this player plays in this position. Like we don't really deviate from that. I guess Brian Rebillon being like the one exception who is converted into midfield from right back, but that took time, and it feels a lot more fluid with Hutch's system than maybe Mark's in the past. But the midfield kind of remains a question. So we mentioned Calvillo, we mentioned Richie, but in central midfield, I think it's an area of the field that we've typically felt pretty heavy in, and I guess the reality is that the central midfield positions are I would say a little de-emphasized in Hutch's system. And I think based on the signings he's made, like it does seem like he hasn't put a lot of weight in like going out and finding, aside with Calvillo aside, like he hasn't really tried to identify a lot of like traditional central midfielders.
Yeah, I think that just is another marker of a departure tactically. From what we've seen in preseason and what we can glean from the transfer market, the transfer window overall, it does seem like Hutch is really going to emphasize width and verticality, whereas midfield possession was really the name of the game under Mark Lowry. So yeah, like you said, we've got Eric Calvillo who can play deeper or play as a box-to-box midfielder, which I think is what John Hutchinson thinks of him as, and what he might think of himself as well. Plays that position for the national team, for the El Salvador national team, as well as for the title-winning Orange County last season. Um, Richie Ryan, known quantity. We know what he can do. Is getting up there in age, to be fair to him, but still um, classy as ever on the ball. Chapa Herrera is back, a Paso boy. We know he can graft, and I think there will be a role for him to play. Maybe not necessarily as a starter, but certainly, coming off the bench against tired legs, closing out games. And like I said, I think a lot of players that we think of as attacking midfielders are going to play a bit deeper, and be allowed to arrive late into the box and play as eights, if you will. Luna, Sebastian, Dylan Mares. I think they're going to be asked to do those things just based on what we have seen in preseason. So it remains to be seen if that'll work. To be fair, and I think I would have liked maybe one more signing in that area that you can definitely say plays in the middle of the park. I think again I would have loved to keep Nick Ross because I think his metronomic passing and his ball retention is among some of the best in USL. But you're right to point out that it looks like Hutch didn't really emphasize that too much. And what I will say is, without knowing how these players are going to develop and what they might be converted into or used as, the team does feel top heavy, if you will. I mean, you can call it top heavy or you can spin it and say we're stacked, right? So, whatever floats your boat. But yeah, attack, I'm not worried about it at all. But midfield is a bit of an unknown, I think.
It is, I would say, compared to how we felt previously, where it felt like we had a lot of central midfielders, even to the point where we were loaning out central midfielders just due to having excess. It does feel now like we're a little bit light in the center of the park. I'm inclined to think that it has to do with, and we can speak about the defense now, and having the fullbacks playing further infield, inverted, however you want to say it, like almost in a, Liverpool sort of way, like with Trent Alexander-Arnold moving into midfield or City has done it in the past with Kyle Walker, like moving into those like more central positions. Though that sort of approach could make it where, he's minimized like the central midfield a little bit because he's emphasizing these fullbacks more. And with that, we did get a couple of questions about the defense and about that back line. And so Mark _P617 on Instagram asked, the aggressive focus creates a counterattack vulnerability. How's the back line look? And Christian, I mean, it's tough to say given we've gotten kind of limited exposure, but how are you feeling about the defense under Hutch?
I think it's just going to be different. I think that this is not going to be the defensive-minded team that we're familiar with, and so it's gonna look messy, especially probably for the first couple of games. They're getting real game minutes in this new philosophy. I think it's gonna look really bad on the back end for a couple of weeks. So I think that's just something to expect. But I feel like they'll grow into it. I think as fans will grow to appreciate it, and hopefully, if Newton's numbers, are all they're cracked up to be, then I think that it'll all work out in the end. I think that having a really solid goalkeeper is the key to having that. To use Mika's words, that top heavy kind of offense. When you have that top heavy type of offense, I just think that having the best possible person in the net is the only antidote.
Yeah, I think, and Mika, I mean, you've seen this or seen this in practice in terms of like what Hutch has done with Ange Postecoglou at Yokohama and how Ange like plays with Celtic, and So we've got like some evidence of kind of what he's going for. But in terms of the idea that like being aggressive makes us more vulnerable, like how do you think about, I guess, that whole aspect of like, does it inherently like make us more vulnerable, or is it just is this just a different approach?
Does it inherently make us more vulnerable? Yeah, I think it does. Um, but I think we've seen at all levels of the game that it can be very exciting and can get you results. Maybe this is not as timely because he did just lose his job, but Marcelo Bielsa got Leeds promoted after many, many years outside of the top division with that really, aggressive man marking style, pressing for the entire game. So, and when we're talking about Hutch, he kind of is okay with that. He's told us, I'm not interested in managing the game. I want to score 4 or 5 goals, even if that's we're going hell for leather the entire time. Now, practically speaking, can that be sustained? I don't think so. But at the same time, this is a coach who's had a very good upbringing himself in football, having been a player for 2 decades and worked under some really, really good coaches like Ange, who you mentioned there, and I think he'll know what tweaks to make sure that results don't get out of hand. To be fair, and I think you brought up a really good point about the inverted fullbacks, if you will, augmenting midfield. I think that is something that we're going to see, and it's something that I really learned a lot from your piece on Harry Brockbank and how he's going to be used, because the runs that he makes are exactly that. I mean, he does kind of become an 8, in attacking phases of play, and I think that will give us more numbers in areas where the ball might turn over. So, um, yes, I think there is a vulnerability there, but I think that's a calculated risk, and I think that it's very intentional by Hutch. As for the back line, the look of it overall, I think, to be fair, I think it's light. I think we'll see again. It's so hard to tell who's gonna do what, but on paper, it's Yuma Monsalves, who a wonderful servant to the club, a bit reckless, shocking tackle in preseason.
Really bad.
So
Yeah.
yeah, against New Mexico United, and we know that he's got that in his locker. Can get red cards and what have you, and get into it with other players. Um, Ander Aguiluth, who is new this year, is his first time playing professionally in North America. Obviously, has played in the Spanish lower leagues, and that is, more than good enough experience, I think, for the level that we're at. But a player that possibly sees himself more in midfield than as a center back, and then Payares, who is definitely an unknown quantity. Like, anyone who's watched the Colombian top flight, like, get at me, because I certainly have not. And John, he acknowledged that too. That, like, this is a player that looks fantastic on paper, but we'll have to see.
Yeah.
And in the clips, of course. So, and then we know that we've got people who can augment if need be. Andrew Fox has played center back plenty for us, and maybe even Matt Boehner can fill in there if needed. But I think on paper it is a little bit light, and with the likes of Mishak Jerome moving on, that's tough. So yeah, I can see why there's a bit of concern among the fans that on paper this defense looks a bit on the light side. And there's new faces all through that defense as well as in the goalkeeping position. So I share that hesitancy, but yeah, the tactics are going to be what they are, and yeah, I think there is a bit more vulnerability, and we're trading solidity for more goals, I think, this season. But we'll just have to see how it plays out.
It leads nicely into the next question from @HJ the Third on Twitter. How far do you think we'll regress defensively if we regress? And I think, like, a few of the things that you guys brought up, it is a different approach for sure. The approach that Lowry teams took was, we're going to possess the ball, and if we have possession of the ball, then you don't. And then when we're attacked, we're gonna like drop back. We're gonna like retreat into our half. We did press at times, but it was very selective, I would say, compared to maybe some of the teams that Lowry idolized. We definitely didn't press with the intensity of a Liverpool or a City or something like that. We retreated normally. Once the opponent was entering our third. But this new style does rely a lot on having the ball, but having the ball like in attacking areas, and not just having possession for the sake of it, and also winning the ball back high up the field. So the kicker is, and I think we've seen this in terms of criticisms of a lot of big clubs recently, but I mean, Liverpool, it is, I know it because I hear it from pundits or whatever, watching Liverpool games, where there's been this kind of like criticism of the high line and saying that, oh, they're extra vulnerable because of the high line. And ultimately, like, it's a risk reward. Like, there is risk in playing a high line because you leave space behind you. That's the whole point of it. And in this case with Locomotive, if we are pressing high, naturally the defense is going to be higher up the field if we're pressing high and we're compressing the field and trying to, I think any defense that relies on the offside flag of a, pro referee here in the United States is going to be, we're going to get burned a handful of times. Like, there's going to be a time where there's a missed offside. Let's just like get that out there. That will happen. But the whole thing is predicated on basically two things. The first is pressure on the ball. So if we're pressing and we're making it difficult to make those sorts of passes or see those passes, that's step one. So it's not necessarily like a backline thing. It's really like a whole team thing. And the second is we are going to have to like catch people offside from time to time. And that isn't always going to be perfect. And that takes a lot of work, a lot of practice. The backline has to be extremely in sync, like, and able to move in a coordinated way to catch people offside. Anyways, I say all that just to say, like, I think we'll regress defensively in the sense that I think we're going to allow more goals than we did last year. But that's setting an extremely high bar, because by the time we got to last season, we were not allowing a lot of goals, except for, I mean, a couple of anomalies late in the season where we really, for whatever reason, just shipped 5 to LA Galaxy and 4 to RGV or whatever it was. Just
5-0. Dear God.
Oh my God. I'm actually getting upset just even thinking about it. I was mentioning it offhand and here I am getting mad. And then, but I do think yes, like, if the answer is, or if the question is like, are we going to allow more goals than we did last season? Probably. Like, I would imagine. But I do think that the system it's not like an inherently worse approach than what Lowry did, which was possess the ball and then drop back if you lose it. This is just a different approach to, if we lose the ball, win it back. And if you do that, then you're creating scoring chances for yourself. So yeah, it's just a risk reward thing. And I don't think we'll regress just because we're trying something. I think we'll regress initially because I don't think the team will get it perfectly right, from the first kickoff.
Fair. Yeah, on top of that, again, so many new faces in that back line. The partnership that seems to have stuck in preseason was Payares Eguiluz. 2 players, one from Colombia, one from Spain. I mean, they're going to have to get to know each other. They've been getting to know each other, but those partnerships are really, really key. And, Yuma probably going to be more of a bit part player this season, and Mishak Jerome is gone. So that synergy is really important as well. So I have to agree. I think we will concede more, but I think that's only natural because we were extremely stingy, like to almost statistical anomaly point
Yeah.
as far as how good we were defensively and as a unit. So yeah, there will be a regression, but I agree, Phil. I don't think that means the tactics are bad or that the approach is inherently wrong. Um, the high line is in vogue right now, so it's not that shocking to me that the new coach wants to do it.
And Christian, we got a little bit burned by just U.S. immigration because Harry Brockbank just now made it to the States. So we've got our probably who would have been considered our starting right back is just now beginning his preseason, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, but it is what it is, and I think that I'm guessing then that means that probably Boehner will be the starter there, and he's done plenty for us. I think we grossly underrated him for before he started appearing regularly, and he definitely helped us put our foot in our mouths about that, and so we'll probably see him for on Saturday in Sacramento and probably the following week at home against New Mexico. But we know what happened, the last time that he had to play New Mexico. So I'm not too worried about it.
Well, as we're approaching starting to talk about some of the season and everything, I want to talk about this tactical outlook. We've talked about the different facets of the team, but Mika, how are we actually thinking that we're going to line up? Like in terms of what can the fans in this first game in Sacramento, what do you guys think are what is that actual tactical setup going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, John Hutchinson spoke to us about how it's really not necessarily about the shape, but about about the formation, but about the roles and the understanding that the players have. But if I have to put a formation to it, I think we'll probably play a 4-3-3. It seems like that was the formation of choice, at least to start. As a starting position or an off the ball kind of formation for Hutch's side. So yeah, 4-3-3. I think we'll have 1-6, 2-8s, two wingers, a back four, and a lone striker. That's what I expect to see, and I think that is probably. I mean, again, it's a formation, but it's so fluid. I think there's all these different roles that these players have. It's going to end up with a lot of these players in areas of the pitch that you might not expect, especially with the underlapping fullbacks that we talked about. The fact that the midfielders are going to have that license to get forward and try to score goals as well. And the wingers as well, depending on who it is that's playing. We have a lot of different options in those attacking areas. So that's kind of what I see us running with. But we'll save the starting 11 for another question I think that we have later on. So,
Christian, any thoughts on that? On how this Locomotive team's gonna look on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, I think the 4-3-3 for Saturday is pretty accurate, and I think that who's available, it's going to be really really fluid too. If need be, we might have to pivot in there sometimes. With either Richie and Chapa or Yuma and Chapa or Yuma and Richie, if need, out of necessity. And I think that we have the personnel to do that too. And maybe even see, with the back situation with the quality on the wings that we have, especially with someone like Nick and Nick Hines, and someone that we haven't mentioned yet, Ricardo Zacharias. That have that physical quality to be able to get up the field and be aggressive with the ball, and also get back and be aggressive defensively. So I just think that the personnel get a lot of flexibility for however Hutch.
Yeah, I do think it'll be an interesting. Well, it'll be interesting to see how we line up, because I think we'll learn a lot about the opinions of Hutch about preseason, because I mean, the reality, and we talk about this a lot, like the fact of the matter is that we see a game a week, or, in some cases 3 games a week because of USL, but we see just the games, and we don't necessarily see, training day in and day out. And we don't see like how players are performing as opposed to, what Hutch has set out for him. So Mika, I mean, at the end of the day, like that informs a lot of this.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad you brought up training, because one thing that we can say for sure is that training is a lot more intense under John Hutchinson, and that's what we understand from our sources, that these players are constantly jogging, like even to the water fountain. I mean, you need to be moving with pace.
Yeah.
And with that being said, there is concern that the squad is not as fit as it should be, maybe. After 60 minutes, we've heard reports of guys getting gassed and things like that. But yeah, but that, I think that's one of those things that will just serve us well down the stretch, though, as we gain strength and endurance and all those kind of things. So it's just a really big shift, I think, from what we're accustomed to under Mark Lowry.
You mentioned Bielsa earlier, and I think it is quite fitting, because when watching the Leeds United like documentary and all those things, a lot of the players talked about the fact that when Bielsa first came in, they were just like beat down from the training. Like it was just extremely difficult. It was getting in
Murder
condition.
ball.
Yeah, exactly. Like getting in condition to play that style took time to get used to. And so I think there's an aspect of that. Like I do, I'm not saying that he's being, bullheaded about the whole thing, but I think he demands a certain level of conditioning and demands a certain level of performance. So, yeah, he's, I think it's safe to say that there's been an occasion or two where actually we've had to reschedule a podcast due to an extra session getting scheduled for a player. So there are a lot of demands around the players, and Hutch certainly has ratcheted up the intensity to make sure that this tactic ends up matching what it is he expects. And speaking of expectations, that brings us to our next couple of questions. The first of which is from @ebow27, Eric Bauer on Twitter. He asks, I know it's difficult without having seen the squad really play together, but what are your expectations for the season, and what would you want to see to define the season as a success?
Oof, I'm punting to Christian first.
I think that just we can expect it to just be different from what we've seen, and that we keep saying it, but it's because it's true. This is just going to be very different from what we've seen. It's probably going to feel more strange than March of 2019, because at that point we had no idea. We didn't have an identity to this club to compare it to, and now we've had 3 years of something, and I think it's going to be a total shift. So I think it's just feel very foreign. I think as far as what is going to define a successful season for this team, I think that it's going to be, if I had to give like a quantitative answer, I think it's going to be, we have 33 games, I think, winning 18 of them, 18 wins. I think will be a successful season, and maybe even having a winning record on the road, just little things, and then not to say that that's any small, but I think that, just setting benchmarks like that for this first season, I think it's lofty to say, get to the championship, get to the conference championship. Not that I don't think, well, but I think that it's just a really high bar for such a new team.
Yeah, I mean, in a league where you have playoffs, that is always the obvious marker, right? Is making those making said playoffs, and it's nice that in our 3 years of existence, we've done it every single one of those seasons is make the playoffs. We got dumped out in the first round very unceremoniously last season, and that's really what helped move along all the change. So would I like to see us back in the show again? Of course. But I don't know. That might be the lazy answer. I think I like Christian's approach of maybe win more games on the road. I think we were pretty underwhelming on the road a lot of times. Um, last season and in previous seasons under Mark Lowry. Um, I really want to see the team gel quickly as well. I hope that we can see the guys clearly getting along with one another, getting on well with one another, and forming understandings on the pitch sooner rather than later, because then that can only mean in good results for us. But yeah, I think most fans would see making the playoffs as that easy bar to kind of put up on the wall and say this is what we need to get to. But I'm gonna try and look more holistically, personally, and say if there's clear progress to this tactical identity that John Hutchinson is trying to implement, then that would be good enough for me. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know that we can definitively say like we're gonna go to another Western Conference final or anything like that. That would be I think a surprise, to be fair. And as I've spoken about on the pod, plenty of times, there's a lot of luck involved in that kind of knockout atmosphere as well. So, it's hard to hang your hat on that for me personally. But yeah, as long as there's progress all the way through, that marks that bodes well. That augurs well for me.
Yeah, I think there has to be a expectation. I think given the history and given the amount of players that got retained, like I think it's fair to expect playoffs. I think that's okay. I think when you ask the team and like everyone we've spoken to is like, yeah, we want to make the playoffs, we want to do this, but like really we just want to win the game in front of us. So that, you'll always get that line. But I think anyone on that team who thinks like finishing outside the top half of the Western Conference is acceptable, like no one's going to admit that. And the reality is a lot of teams make the playoffs for how many teams there are in the league. So I think playoffs is a fine goal. Now, yeah, once you're in the playoffs, kind of a crapshoot. And you hope for the best. You hope you get the bounces. We've seen both sides of that, I would say, in our short existence. And yeah, I think making the playoffs is probably what I would say would be a success, because you can build off that. I think teams who kind of get in this spiral and are losing a lot of games and are just falling down the table, like it can really damage the long-term project. And I think the reality for Locomotive now is like we've set the expectation across 3 seasons where there would be pressure on the team and on the manager if they weren't in playoff contention. So yeah, I do think that fans broadly need to manage their expectations in terms of, I don't think we're going to be right at the top of the league. But this team does have the ability, I would say, on paper to be a playoff caliber team. So we got another question about expectations from at NL Brown 2005 on Instagram, and they said, at a minimum, what should our expectations be? Which I think we've outlined. But he said, or they said afterwards, aside from the 7-0 win against San Antonio FC, preseason was bad. And I just wanted to kind of call some attention to this and I'm not calling out this particular person. So NL Brown, if you're out there, this is not shade. I think I just wanted to address like preseason as a whole. I have some like pretty stern thoughts about preseason in terms of results. And I think we mentioned it earlier in the podcast that preseason can be a tough barometer. Like it can be tough to tell what exactly is going on. But I do want everyone to just like kind of take some of the importance off of the results in preseason, because lots of variance in lineups, lots of variance in player availability, lots of variance in like academy guys playing. There's just a lot of variables, like, and I would argue that the, what was it, a 4-1 loss to New England tells us about as much about the team. Like the result itself tells us as much about the team as 7-0 against San Antonio FC. Like all of the context is taken out when you just look at a preseason result. And the reality is like, what was the performance that was happening over the 90 minutes? Or what was the performance that was happening in specific moments within that friendly that inform us about, you know, future performance? And the reality is like, we didn't see that much. Like we saw a handful, like we saw some of preseason, but we didn't get to see all of it. And it's just really tough to judge. Like there are players who, and I kind of had this conversation on the USL show earlier this week, but there was a guy talking about a San Diego friendly that they lost, but he was like, I really loved X player and just like how he was playing in his, you know, in his position and how he was receiving the ball, how he was progressing the ball, like all of these kind of mini little things that you don't catch in a box score or in like the final result. So this is not, again, not to crap on the comment, because obviously we appreciate the engagement, but I did just want to call out that preseason results can be pretty misleading.
Yeah, I always think about couple seasons ago, I think it was probably like International Champions Cup, but Atletico Madrid shellacked Real Madrid in Miami, I think it was, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, like Atleti's gonna have a great season, Madrid's washed, like all this," and that is not how it ended up playing out in the regular season.
Yeah.
So you know, those shocking scorelines that you see in preseason, it's really hard to draw any definitive conclusions from them. I mean, again, you can't really. Yes, you know, they may kick off for 90 minutes, but that's not a really true representation of a competitive fixture. You can't really replicate that, I don't think, because the stakes are just not there. So you know, naturally, I mean, players are going to tell you all day long, like, yes, we treat everything like seriously, and they do. But psychologically, I think there is that subconscious like difference in performance levels, and you know, the chopping and changing the academy players. A lot of academy players played in New England. Yeah, I wouldn't make too much of it. Would it be nice to get a bunch of good results in preseason? Sure, but then maybe that gives us this like security blanket that we probably shouldn't have. Like we might be thinking the team is in a better place than it is. Like, you know, that can cut the other way too. So, it's a good question, and it brings up a really interesting discussion. But I personally don't really draw a lot from pieces, and I think it's about getting in shape.
Well, with that, we can get on to some predictions ahead of the season. So I just want to go around the horn as we look at a few of these questions and get everybody's answer. So the first question, and we can just go, Christian, we can start with you, and then we'll go to Mika and then to me. But the first question is, who wins the Golden Boot for Locomotive? And for those who don't know, that's just top goal scorer for the team.
Yeah, I'm gonna make like a really wild prediction here. And I think that there's going to be a lot of goal scoring, and I think it's going to come from a lot of different places. And I think because of that, I think that we'll have a tie for our goals. I predict that both Lucho and Diego will have 12 goals this season.
I hope, yeah, manifest that, please, because that would be lovely. I maybe this is obvious, maybe it's not. I don't know, but I think Diego Luna is going to go to another stratosphere this season. I think he's only showed us like a glimpse of what he can do, which is ridiculous because that's already a lot. But he's got that first professional season under his belt. A manager has come in who wants to play on the front foot, and I think that can only do wonders for Diego's game. And he is, to be fair, going to put himself in the shop window. We said he's been going over to Europe and trialing. There's plenty of interest in him. Getting looks by the U.S. Men's national team setup. So I am earmarking Diego for a big goal scoring season. I think he will bag loads, and I think he'll probably lead us in the goal scoring charts. And yeah, I'll probably get his big move. To be fair,
I'm having this like selection dilemma because I don't know who Hutch favors. Like in terms of who's gonna score. I think Diego and Lucho are both great shouts. But I think at the end of the day, there is, just there's a clear center forward. And I think there's gonna be those moments where Lucho grabs goals in and around like the 6-yard box. Like he has some of those poacher's efforts. And so I think his count gets a little bit higher just because of that. So I am going to stick with Lucho. Just that fox in the box type stuff that he is the quintessential like number 9 center forward. He's so good on the turn, all of those things that I think he just edges. But I would say that I do agree that I think Diego is going to have a really high output season. Now that we know, let's be real. And this actually, I may pull forward another question since we're on the topic of Diego. This question came from at Paul B915 on Instagram. He asked, who's the preseason prediction for MVP and why is it Diego? In the press conference that announced John Hutchinson as the manager of Locomotive, he was still in Australia and he said, Diego Luna is the best player in USL. He didn't say he was the best player or he's most excited to work with Diego. He said he is the best player in USL. It's high praise, but Christian, you mentioned it. You think Diego is going double-digit goals and assists this year. Like that makes him the MVP if he reaches those sorts of heights.
I don't think that Hutch saying that Diego is the best player in the USL is a ridiculous statement. He's young, and so he obviously has maturing and growing still left to do. But he's not a developing player. He's a star now. So I think that it's not it's not a question. It's the biggest player for Locomotive this year is going to be Diego Luna.
Would you agree, Mika? Do you think Diego is pip for MVP?
Ooh, of the club or of like
of the club?
Okay.
Well, I don't know. Paul's question may have been, it says preseason prediction for MVP. So he could be talking about USL.
I don't see any reason why Diego couldn't reach those heights. What I will say is, with this tactical shift and with what we know of what's gone down in training and preseason, this is a physically taxing style, and I think more than one of us have noticed that Diego is quite stout, right? His body type is a little unorthodox. He's kind of the I don't know who you'd compare it to, maybe like a Sheridan Shaqiri type player. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but I think if he could stay healthy, for sure he'll be able to do that. And we know that younger players, they're still trying to fill out their bodies and get to terms with playing at that high level. So if there's anything that stops Diego being the MVP, it would be that. Now I'm knocking on wood. I don't know if you can hear it, but hopefully he stays healthy and can contribute throughout. But yeah, I see no reason why he can't be that guy for us.
Yeah, I said on the USL show on Tuesday, I said this and I stand by it, that if Locomotive are up in the heights that some have predicted them to remain, like up in maybe the top, 3 or 4 teams in the West, Diego Luna will be playing like MVP caliber soccer for us. Like, I think if we're having a good season, it's probably directly connected to him just being hugely central to what we're doing. And it's not to say that like other players won't contribute. There's loads of talent in this team, and there's loads of people who are going to make a difference for us day in and day out. But in terms of just like impact, and I mean, some of the, a video was on Twitter today of Diego Luna's highlights, and it just reminds me of some of the things that he does so well, which he's just totally fearless whenever he gets within 25 yards of goal, he backs himself to score. And those sorts of instincts, his ability to find a pass, his ability to take on a shot, his ability to send a defender the wrong way, all those things are going to feed him opportunities this season to make a big difference for Locomotive. And I think he's going to end up being incredibly central to everything we do, which seems like an obvious statement, but the bottom line is the kid's dynamite, and he could absolutely have a breakout year and he could establish himself as, undeniably the best player in the league with a good season, and earn that move that, the type of player like Gallegos from San Antonio just got his move abroad, and that may embolden young Diego to one up him a bit and get to a significant move himself. But as far as the outcome for the season, we talked about what would be considered a success, but now we're talking predictions. And at Cool Fernie on Twitter, El Presidente, he asked end of year position in the table. What's your prediction?
So we're done with divisions, right?
Yeah, this is single table. Well,
Okay.
conference single table.
Listen, I think if we're being honest, there have been I think almost everyone in the Western Conference has had a really good off season in terms of acquisitions. I mean, just looking around the league, there's been Colorado Springs are scary. I think New Mexico United have retooled. Oakland Roots, I mean, they look good. Phoenix is always a threat. I mean, this is just, Orange County, defending champions, are in our conference. It's a very, very strong conference, and I think we're as good as them, if not better, right? But again, it's a season of transition, of really seismic change, to be fair. And I mean, I put us probably fourth or fifth. I think, I don't know, maybe I'm being conservative, maybe I'm being a little bit lofty with those heights, but yeah, that seems about right. I think there are a couple teams that are in win now mode, including perhaps one that we might talk about shortly here after a pretty shocking season last season. So, yeah, I put us in that upper mid table, I guess you would call it, range.
Yeah, I kind of up there with Mika. I think I have us a little bit lower though. I'm predicting that we're gonna have kind of a repeat of 2000, our first season. I think we'll finish sixth in the conference. I even went as to kind of predict how the rest of the table above us will look, and I think it'll probably be on top again. Phoenix, Colorado Springs, and then 3 and 4 I wasn't quite sure of. I think probably Orange County again. Phoenix, Colorado Springs, Orange County, San Antonio, Sacramento, and then us. So I think 6, which if the format is the same as it was in the that original season, that'll still get us into the playoffs without having to play a play-in game. So I think that is a good spot for us to be in.
Yeah, I think it's top 7 make the playoffs.
Oh, okay.
So just over half, I guess, of the conference with 13 teams now. I'll split the difference and I'll say fifth. I think there's a lot of question marks still around Orange County. I think New Mexico is definitely better than they were, but not necessarily like the finished product. Again, I think they're going to have a lot of, like, not dissimilar to Locomotive. They're going to have a lot of adapting to do, and it's just a matter of whether they can actually do it with a brand new head coach, and not just a brand new head coach, but a guy who's never been a head coach. So I think what you guys said makes a ton of sense. I think Phoenix, Colorado Springs, those are kind of like, they're tipped to be, up there or thereabouts again at the top of the table. I think there's still question marks about Orange County. I think Sacramento is a very good team. And again, I think similar to Locomotive, it's like, how quickly can they put it together? But yeah, so I'll say fifth for that at the end of the year. But I do think it'll be close. Like, I think the West is going to be extremely tightly contested. Despite there being some really good teams in there, I think a lot of the conference is good. There's not a lot of like gimme wins. I think, there's a couple of teams who on paper are much weaker, but it's not the level of like, well, depending on how lights look. But them aside,
if anyone's a punching bag, it might be them. Yeah.
So with that, the last prediction is, and we touched a little bit on this, but which signing do you guys think is going to have the biggest impact this year? Of the new players we've brought in.
Yeah. Again, I think I'm gonna go with Cristiano Francois. He's got a body of work that we can look at. He already looks really good in the limited minutes I've seen of him in preseason, and the signing itself feels like a statement that we might be retooling, we might be even rebuilding, you might say, but we're still a serious contender and we still want to fight for everything that we can, and to pull a player like that from Miami FC, I think that is a statement in and of itself. And so I'm looking at him to be very impactful and to give us I guess an unpredictability, right? Because he is a new player and a stylistic departure, I think it's fair to say, from what a Mark Lowry side might field. I think we haven't had a player like him since, I don't know, Omar Salgado maybe, in terms of that pace and that size and just the physicality, while being a threat in attacking areas. So yeah, Francois for me is I think set to be a big impact player.
What about you, Christian? Who of the new signings do you think is making a difference? The biggest difference this year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, kind of like I alluded to at the top of the show, that the biggest shoes to fill are going to be Hogan's, and so because of that, I think that new act.
Yeah. I think Newton, his ability to get in quickly, and I had a quick flashback to that first night and that first goal that was conceded on opening night, just the whatever,
the 13 seconds or whatever.
If Newton can make it more than 13 seconds, then like no, I'm just kidding.
OKC Energy paid for that with their existence.
Thanos meme.
Yeah.
What did it cost you? Everything.
Oh my god, we need to make a note. We need to get Austin on that, like immediately. We need to get Austin on that one.
I regret nothing.
No, I get no. Both of those are great shouts, and I think so many of the other signings are like unknowns in that, like, we've seen some of what they can do certainly in preseason, but I mean, I'm gonna just shout out our last interview that we did under Egalus, because I think his impact is going to be more so felt in the, like, can he be a consistent center back presence for us? Because if the partnership ends up being, and I wouldn't hate this on paper, if the partnership ends up being Payatas and Egalus, that could be formidable, and it's, two technically gifted center backs as well who fit well with the style. So I think Egalus might be it, like, if he can gel into that center back position. But then again, not knowing Payares and, like, what his ceiling is in terms of his performance, like, I don't know, we may have the Colombian, Van Dijk on our hands, like, who just, like, totally settles the back line and makes us feel good about the defense going forward. So I think those types of signings could have the biggest impact if by the end of the season we're not talking about the defense.
I think that's fair enough. Yeah.
Like, if all we're talking about is the goals we're scoring and we're not talking about, any other problems, then it means that those players have actually maybe had, like, the biggest impact.
Right.
Well, we do still have to talk about the game against Sac Republic, but maybe we take a quick break and then and come back and chat this game and do our first real predictions of the of the new season.
Yeah, sounds good.
Welcome back, everybody. Well, guys, we've got to preview the upcoming match against Sac Republic this Saturday in Sacramento. And I mean, it's impossible to disconnect this match from the man who has connections to both teams now, and that is the aforementioned Nick Ross. So, I mean, Mika, how are you feeling about what will be known, at least to us, as the Nick Ross Derby?
Yeah, it'll be weird to see him in colors other than Locomotive blue. I mean, we're not gonna be wearing blue, but yeah, and even seeing him in the Instagram and stuff on his pictures on wearing the maroon of Sac Republic, it's just a little bit strange. But we know what Nick can do. We know he's a specialist at ball retention, a very good passer, and in a side that, to be fair, they averaged about 47% possession last season. His signing makes total sense for them. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see, and I'm assuming he'll start because he looks to be one of the better players in that midfield that has been pretty much completely blown up and rebuilt for Sac Republic. So yeah, just a little interesting storyline there to start off the season.
I mean, Christian, I think one of the biggest shockwaves that this move sent, at least for me, was the realization that Nick Ross wouldn't be retiring and becoming the co-commentator for Duke.
Yeah, I think that we were all hoping that he'd go on for several seasons and then finally hang it up and stay as Duke's new partner, but wasn't in the cards, unfortunately, because he did quite a job, when he was given that opportunity.
I know. I will always miss him in the booth. But I guess not to be, unfortunately. Well, talking about Sacramento, I mean, I think based on the conversations around the league, based on conversations like in other podcasts, there is a lot of hype around Sacramento at the moment. And I mean, it's not totally unfounded in that they had some pretty big business in the transfer window with Damia Viader, Nick Ross, as we mentioned, Douglas Martinez, who is no no Locomotive fan is too keen on Douglas Martinez, and I think anyone who remembers the end of the Western Conference Final in 2019 will not think super highly of Sacramento's new striker. But there's also but they also brought in Matt LaGrassa. So I mean, pretty big offseason for Sacramento. I mean, I know Colorado Springs got a lot of the hype, but this was a good transfer market or transfer window for Sacramento. Do you guys think that it's enough to get them out of the mediocrity that they kind of had last season?
Yeah, I think mediocrity was the right word for it, to be fair. I mean, they finished 7th in the Pacific Division. The only worse team than them was Las Vegas Lights, which, I mean, that is not good company to keep, obviously, and, they missed the playoffs. But I think it is a good transfer window for them, and there's continuity there that we can't say that we have in terms of the coaching staff and the retention of Mark Briggs, who also is the technical director. So that's good for them. And let's be honest, I mean, this club has won USL Championship before. And maybe there's a bit of malaise around the club because of everything that happened with like MLS swerving them and all this. So they kind of strike me as a bit of a sleeping giant in that way. But I think they've done really good business. I mean, just, the players that you outlined there, that's just a smattering of all the signings that they made. But I mean, just going down the list, LaGrassa, that's a player who's in his prime, who's got MLS experience. Damia Viader, the left back who was USL League One's Defender of the Year. A ridiculous goal threat for Omaha last season. 7 goals, 5 assists. I mean, to get that from a defender is incredible. Obviously, it's a step up from League One, but we've seen players make that step up and do well in USL Championship. So I think that's a coup for them. Nick Ross, again, we know what he can do. Douglas Martinez, I mean, this is the player that powered Real Monarchs to a USL title. So they've brought in winners as well. I think it was 16 goals, 7 assists in 22 matches that season for Real Monarchs. Didn't quite make the impact he might have wanted to with the parent club, Real Salt Lake, but he did get a little bit of experience with them as well. So, they've brought in an array of talent, an array of experience from League One to MLS vets and things like that, and USL Championship mainstays like Nick Ross. So I think it was a very successful mercato for them, if you will, and I think they're going to suffer from some of the same things as us, though, in terms of there's bound to be some adjustment period with that high of a turnover. And to be fair, there were key losses as well. I mean, goal scoring was hard enough for this team, and Cameron Iwasa has decided to hang it up. He was last season's leading goal scorer with 8, I believe it was. A lot of goals have left in the forms of Darius Formella, who went to rivals Oakland Roots. Tucker Bowen was not brought back either, and he scored 5. And at the back as well, Tomas Gomez, the starting goalkeeper, was picked up by Real Salt Lake, so they had to bring in a new goalkeeper as well. So there's a lot of parallels, I think, actually, between Locomotive and Sacramento in that way. But I do think they're built more for immediate success, given that there is continuity in the back group staff, and it's just about making those players gel sooner rather than later.
So, you guys are doing it again. We're having a repeat of last season here, because you're talking about all these new signings, but you're leaving out my personal favorite of theirs. They did bring back Rodrigo Lopez, a player that I was hoping Locomotive were going to bring last year. He went to RGV, and we saw what happened with RGV. and he was a giant part of that. So I think that, and maybe this isn't as bold a statement as it was last year, but I think that Sacramento is going to be that team in the West of a surprise. Because of their history, I don't think it's as much of a surprise as, when I said that RGV was going to be a shocker, last season. But I do think that they're going to surpass a lot of expectations. And I think that Rodrigo is going to be a big part of that. I mean, he's home. He has played uh, a long time for Sacramento, and I think he's just going to go in there and be comfortable. And I think that he's going to be a leader in that team this season.
It's a good point to not get overly fixated on those the shiny new toys that they've got. But yeah, I think it's safe to say the Sacramento team has gotten significantly better than last year. And this will be Sacramento, actually, their official account, when they tweeted out a preview of this game, they mentioned that this is the first time since the first season in that rain-delayed 1-0 Locomotive late win. Also, it could be known to some as the Gomez game. For those who watched along with us from holy cow, what was that place called?
Whiskey Blonde.
Whiskey Blonde, Jesus Christ. It's been a long couple of years. That feels like a different lifetime. So anyways,
different universe.
That was 2020 BC, but 2020 before COVID.
Before COVID.
Oh, God.
That was 2019.
2019. Yeah.
So yeah, I think the Sacramento team is quite different, and it is nice in this format where Locomotive is back to playing teams that we haven't really had the chance to play, like over the last couple of seasons with all of the divisional play and so getting out from underneath this, like we're playing the same four teams over and over and over again. It'll be nice to have some variety, but it also leads to this where there are these matchups that there's not that familiarity. There's not that like built up, sort of understanding of how the other team plays and everything. So I think it'll be a really interesting matchup. I think typically these early season games lend themselves to kind of, I don't want to say stalling out, but the teams kind of canceling each other out or feeling each other out, like because, teams are trying to keep things kind of mellow. This kind of, for me, has the vibe of Orange County at the beginning of last year, where we're coming in, we're feeling pretty confident about the fact that our team is going to be good. They were feeling confident that their team was also good. Oh, and I'm saying Orange County at the beginning of 2020. Sorry. At the 20. Yeah. Anyways, like the COVID short, right before COVID hit, we played Orange County to a 1-1, I think, or a 0-0. 0-0. That sort of vibe like could totally happen in terms of teams just not really, having that ability to cancel each other out. But anyways, Eric Bauer had another question at ebout27 on Twitter. He asked, what is your projected starting 11 for this first game?
Shall I go first? Okay. Like I said, I think 4-3-3 is how we're gonna go. So I think Newton in goal. It's a back four. I think it'll be from left to right: Fox, Payares, Aguiluz, John Brown. I think we'll play right back. Been an attacker at NISA level, but built as a defender, so I'm gonna throw him in there. Midfield three of Ryan anchoring, Richie Ryan, with with Velasquez and Luna either side of him, with license to bomb on. So, pray for Richie. And I think it's going to be a front three of Francois one side, Zacarias on the other, and Solignac leading the line.
Very
Yeah.
attacking. Very attacking.
I think it could have been more attacking, which is the funny part. So yeah.
Jesus. Yeah, I'm very similar to Mika there. The only changes is I don't think that because maybe I'm not understanding correctly, but I don't think that John Brown has been here for longer. Maybe he hasn't. I missed it, but I was thinking that probably Boehner would be at that right back spot. But everything else, I'm right there with you.
It's
Phil?
it's interesting. I think my only thought is like does he play a double pivot with a 10, like two holding midfield, well I say holding midfielders, two central midfielders with a 10 versus like playing a 3, and so that's my only real variation. And I think in terms of the personnel, we could see Calvillo in central midfield if we deploy a 10. And I think if we deploy a 10, then the attacking 4, I guess, would be, I think it'll be Diego, Velasquez, for maybe Sonope, and then I think he might actually go with Francois as a striker in that arrangement.
Ooh.
In the 4-2-3-1.
And that's Diego Luna as the cam, right?
So I think
Or
based
so
on what we've heard from the
Velasquez.
players, I think Velasquez plays as a 10 just because every freaking player that we had on here was like, and Vela in the 10, whatever. Like,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think it's been that way, but I think I also like Luna coming in off the left because I think we saw it last year. He's definitely not like a traditional winger, but I do like the idea of him having the license to be able to come in from wide.
For sure.
But I think that kind of demonstrates, like, and thank you, Eric, for the question. I think it demonstrates just how we're not, I think when we were trying to pick 11s for Lowry teams, we were picking in the exact same formation, same roles, and just moving people. It's like there is a lot of room where we think like this could look wildly different, like match to match, not in terms of like wildly different from an actual like setup, but in terms of the positions that they're ostensibly deployed in, like I think we could see some differences. But with all that being said, the time has come, and it is the first week of Seriously Loco's Pick'em. And Christian, I mean, I think it's safe to say you can get this kicked off, but we've had a lot of varied results over the last few years, and now we start season 4, fresh slate, and it's time to put it all on the line.
Yeah, I had to dust off the old Google. Hadn't been open since October 26, 2021. Just to get a little recap here. We know that Austin kind of dominated our iteration of this. Season 3 was much closer. I took the title with 25 points, Phil in second with 19. But it's a clean slate. It's a clean slate here. So I'll go ahead and start our format here. I believe that we are going to get a draw, like we were talking about in that Orange County first match in 2020. I think we're going to have a draw here, and I think it's going to be a 1-1 draw. And I think this wasn't someone that we mentioned in the starting lineup, but for the culture, I have to say Gomez is going to end up getting a goal.
For the culture.
The heritage. I can't believe I'm doing this because I don't think I've ever done this before on the pod, but it just feels like there's a lot in Sacramento's favor for this one. Um, Being a home game, 7 p.m. kickoff, COVID restrictions have eased in California quite a bit. I think they're expecting a full house. Um, I'm going with a 2-1 Sacramento Republic victory. I don't know that with all the change and all the travel and all that we're going to be at our very best. And I know that John has had some reservations about the fitness. I think he would have liked to have probably another Menta preseason if he could. But yeah, I'm going Sacramento to take the 3 points for this one. And hopefully we can regroup when we host the Derby rivals when we come back to El Paso. Now, I would love to be wrong. Love to be wrong. I'd love to get a result on the road to start off the John Hutchinson era, but I think it's a tall task.
Yeah, I do think this is a tall order. I will say that I think the one thing that has me feeling okay is the fact that they are doing some adapting as well. I'll stick with the prediction I made earlier this week. So I'm keeping I'm keeping with my, I'm not hedging my bets and guessing different things on different shows. So I will say a 2-2 draw. I did say it would be a scoring draw. So I think it's going to be 2-2, and I think this is going to be, because of the quality on both sides in attack, I think we're going to see a little bit of a, instead of seeing like the cagey sort of like 0-0 that we saw at Orange County first game of 2020, I think we see something a little more sloppy, a little more like, hey, both these teams are figuring it out. And I would say as far as a goal scorer for Locomotive, I think, yeah, I mean, start as you mean to go on. I think Diego Luna gets on the score sheet, and Diego Coyne just starts going straight to the moon from day one.
Oh, I didn't pick a goal scorer, did I?
Oh,
I'm
no,
gonna go
you
Diego
didn't.
Luna as well. I think yeah.
You were
There's
too
been,
you were too like you were too busy contemplating like whether you're going to get ripped up by the faithful for picking us to lose.
I know. I hate to do it. I do.
Hey, go, you gotta,
None of us picked a win. That's crazy.
we're all managing our own expectations.
Trying not to get hurt.
Yeah. Watch us go out there and just thump them. Just
That would be absolute scenes, to be fair.
well, yeah, 2 draws and a loss. Definitely the bleakest predictions you'll find on this podcast in recent years. But in our defense, we do not know what's going to happen out there. Like, we absolutely have no frame of reference. So we're basically guessing blind. So anyways, I think it'll be a good game. Like, I truly do think it'll be a good game. And it's just a matter of, yeah, putting some of these pieces together. And gosh, it's just exciting to have the league back. Like, I'm very excited for the start of this season. And as a bit of a fun question here, we got one from @AlexMedic17 on Instagram, and he asked, if we win USL Championship, will you chug a beer on the big screen with me? From Banana Man.
I am notoriously not a big drinker, but if that happens, I will absolutely do it.
Yeah. I think I'd be morally obligated. Yeah, I think so. That's usually Banana Man's shtick, but if he was inviting us into the fold, like, that's a great honor. So yes.
Truly. Yeah, I mean, if Locomotive make it to the final, you know that I'm gonna be there. So, like, I will find I will find Banana Man if present, depending on where it's taking place. Because I know if it's at the SWAT, which I'm not trying to set sights too high. Because let's be honest, if that was going to happen any year, it would have been last year. But
yeah,
rip.
I mean, it probably it probably works better for you, Phil, because I mean, any Eastern Conference venue is a shorter trip than coming to El Paso.
It's true. It's within striking distance. Yeah, any of the East Coast spots are pretty easy to get to. So, but no, I would love to be back down there. I will say I will be able to see Locomotive live this year, almost certainly. Up here in Detroit. So, I at least have that to cling to in the short term.
that'll be fun. Yeah.
But guys, I think that about brings us to the end of our first episode. Feels good to get back into the traditional full episodes. We haven't really been here for a little bit. We've been doing the interviews and articles, and that's all been awesome, really cool to get to know all the players. But we're back in the full swing of things. We will be back for a full review of the Sacramento Republic game early next week. Like, we'll have a pod out for you. And I mean, we discussed doing a watch along. I don't know if we're up for it, if you guys are up for it. I mean, I think we have a platform that we can use for it. So we may start doing the watch alongs again, which I know maybe not to the intensity of what was done previously. But yeah, love the chance to connect with fans for the away matches, when that way you don't have to listen to whoever is assigned, like, to, again, like, some of these away commentators can get pretty rough. So, yeah, you can listen to some fellow fans and get excited with us, have a few drinks, whatever, and we'll just enjoy the match. All that info will be on our Twitter and Instagram. You can find us at Seriously Loco on Twitter, at Seriously_Loco on Instagram. And then if you enjoyed the podcast, please consider leaving us a review. Spotify added the chance to review podcasts now. It's right underneath the description. So if you're into it, leave us a review. It just helps more people find the podcast. And subscribe to us on your podcast platform of choice. And until next time, guys, stay loco.